March 14, 2012, my son Thomas lost his battle with the disease of addiction. I now belong to a club that no parent should ever belong to. Do you know the signs? Do you know the trends that children are doing in today's world? Do you know the signs and symptoms? Do you know the signs and symptoms of drug abuse? I want to empower and educate Long Islanders by bringing a force of professionals and how to prevent the disease of addiction. Long Island in Crisis. Good evening and welcome to Long Island in Crisis. This show is really about the pandemic in the United States for the disease of addiction. Specifically right now, the drug of choice is the heroin and opiate crisis. However, 5 years from now, the drug can always change. So we have to be very conscious of that fact. Addiction is a disease, but it is kidnapping and killing a generation of young people. I lost my son 4 years ago, and today's show, I have my very good buddy here, Anthony Rizzuto, and we're going to talk a little bit about advocacy, because here's what I'm going to tell you today. Not one more death due to anything is acceptable in this country. It used to be 72 people died in an hour, in a 24-hour period from the disease of addiction. That's actually gone up to, I believe, 77 or 78 United States citizens are dying every day. Unacceptable in this country. If it was the Zika virus killing 77 people daily, people would be up in arms and there would be billions and billions of dollars being thrown at a virus. This disease has got a long-standing running start on us, and today we're going to talk about how we can empower all of us to get involved to save our next generation. And if your family, by the grace of God, is not touched by the disease of addiction, let's prepare the world for your grandchildren, great-grandchildren. The time is now. Welcome, Anthony. Welcome. Sorry, I had to get that out.
That was good. Energy. That's a beautiful thing.
You know, I'm just tired of, unfortunately, acknowledging people into a club that no parent should belong to, and their lives being ultimately changed forever by that devastating news.
Yeah. You know, when you were talking, I was thinking about like when you ran some of the numbers over and then you compared it to Zika, or we could do it with Ebola, either one.
Right.
And I was thinking, and as you were speaking, I'm running it through my head, why? What's the difference? And I guess what I came up with just in one word is stigma.
Stigma.
Right, because I think people feel that, well, you don't have any blame in getting Ebola, you don't have any blame in getting Zika, but you make a choice to use drugs. And this is where the divide, I think, comes, coupled with the fact that, you know, the stigma that's associated with addiction, right? And I was just having a conversation with this the other day. There's a young lady, I won't get into particulars to not break her anonymity, but there's a young lady who has become so successful. And unfortunately, you know, she can't talk about, you know, the fact that she is a person in recovery, right? And I was thinking about that, and I was like, I totally understand that, because you don't want to jeopardize future opportunities that might come your way. I understand that.
Terrible?
It really is, because the reality of it is that that's what we need to be able to be said. Like I'm a person who early on, I'm a person in long-term recovery for 22 years. And early on, I kept that really tight to the vest, because I didn't want, even not as much for me, but when you become a husband and when you become a father, you know, you're willing to take it, right? But you don't want your kids or your wife or your family being impacted. I remember years ago, this is just a quick story, when 9/11 happened, after 9/11 happened, the pastor at my church asked if I would be willing to share my story at the church. And, you know, it was kind of almost like coming out of the closet, you know,
Yeah.
because it was something that, you know, I knew what I did, my wife and everything. And so I said, you know, I don't have a problem with it. I said, but I'd like to ask my wife. My kids at the time went to that parish school.
Okay.
And so I spoke to my wife about it, and I said, hey, listen, you know, Father such and such said, you know, would I be willing to do this? And I said, I'd be willing to, but I want to ask you, what do you think? You know, because it was literally, I mean, we were so involved in this parish, and
Yeah.
I mean, really
And you-
involved. And nobody knew about this. So I'm like, you know, I don't want you being shunned or the kids being looked upon differently. So how do you feel about it? And she said, I'm okay with it. If, you know, people want to judge, that's on them, you know. So I went ahead and did it. And then as time has gone on, I've just said, you know what, I'm not keeping this, because I think the reality of it is that we need to see that there is the ability to live a fruitful, successful life with the disease of addiction. Because the disease of addiction, right, it creates this hopeless state of mind and body when you're in the grips of it. And it's important for people to know, just like if
And
you
it-
have
and it-
allergies to peanuts or
And
fish.
it wants to bring you back there.
Absolutely. But it's important for people to know that because you have this disease doesn't mean that you can't have a life beyond your wildest dreams.
Absolutely.
It is possible to put this disease in remission. I have not had a drink or a drug in over 22 years. If I tell you what my life has been like the last 22 years, it has been beyond my wildest dreams. God has blessed me with an incredible wife, 2 beautiful children. I've been successful at the job I do. I'm passionate about the work I do. But if people don't hear that, all they know with addiction is people robbing the store, or people,
Yes.
you know, doing this, or
What
people doing that.
they perceive it to be.
Right.
But if you had fought back and beat stage 1, 2, 3, 4 cancer, people would celebrate
Oh, yeah,
you.
sure.
If you, God forbid, were in a horrible car crash and had to learn how to walk again,
Right.
people would celebrate you.
Absolutely.
So why are we not celebrating someone
Absolutely.
who overcomes a disease that looks to drag you into a corner?
Right. No, absolutely. I agree. And I think it comes back to that idea of stigma. I think that even like, you know, growing up in the 70s, you watch TV shows, you watch, you know, Beretta, you watch Hill Street Blues, you watch, and the picture that's associated with the person who struggles with the disease of addiction is, you know, a lowlife, a criminal. Now, don't get me wrong. The behaviors that are carried out by a person in active addiction fit some of those categories at sometimes. Because when people get really desperate, when you are addicted to a drug, and you
Absolutely.
no longer have the ability to work, you get let go from your job,
And you have
and
a
your
big
body is
habit.
still addicted, you know, you cross lines that you never would have crossed before. You do things that you never
Absolutely.
would have done before. So I think it's important, you know, so the question is, how do we beat the stigma? So we beat the stigma, in my opinion. We beat the stigma for the people who are comfortable are in a place in their life where they're comfortable saying, hi, my name is Anthony, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. I think that's one way to do it. But it's each person gets to make that choice and decision on their time, not on anybody
Absolutely.
else's time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the idea of putting something on Facebook or putting something that you can never pull back anymore.
Correct.
And you don't know who's going to do a background check that's going to affect you from possibly getting a future employment or something along those lines. Thank God I'm at a place in my life where, you know what, it is where it is. That was 23 years ago, and in the last 23 years, it's been an incredible life. I'd like to think that I spend my time on this earth serving my Creator, you know, and using some of the ugliest times of my life to my benefit and to the benefit of others.
How does anyone in this world learn? You learn by your mistakes.
There you go.
So if you can overcome mistakes,
Right.
and you have the wherewithal to really get through the disease of addiction at its lowest forms,
Right.
there isn't anything that you can't accomplish.
Look at you. You had a tragedy happen in your life. A lot of people have experienced the same tragedy. The path that you chose was to scream from the rooftops. When you and I met in Albany, right, you made it real clear you were not someone who was going to remain silent. You were someone who was going to take that pain, take that experience, and you were going to mobilize, and you were going to get out there, and you were going to let anybody that wanted to hear it, and even who didn't want to hear it, was going to hear it about what happened to you and how we have to make a change so that somebody else doesn't go through that. I commend you, but not everybody can do that.
Correct.
So I think that people are at a different place in the process.
Everybody gets to that different place, and people will say, well, I can't do it. You don't have to do what I do.
Right.
But just be willing to make a phone call, be willing to sign a petition, be
Right.
willing to get on a bus and stand in a crowd, because in a group we are very powerful. You don't have to speak.
Right.
But sharing how to, and I don't want to call them leaders. I will call them our elected representatives, because they can certainly be removed at any point in time also. It is the will of the people now that has to come first. So there is no partisan in this
No, absolutely
war
not.
on drugs.
Right.
It is a war right now. So we need to mobilize our citizens, and we should demand treatment on demand, access to treatment on demand when I want it, when I need it, and not, no, my opiate addiction is not going to be cured in 7 hours or 7 days. My opiate addiction is going to be cured when I am healthy and well to be moved to a step-down unit.
It's a process. You reminded me of something a few years back. I don't remember which war it was, but I was watching something on the news, and they were doing some interviews, and they were saying, when it comes to this war, there is no Democrat and there is no Republican. We are Americans. And
We're human beings.
And well, that goes even to the bigger
Right.
picture. But I think the point is, I think that when it comes to this here, this is one thing. There's one little silver lining, and you'd like to believe that everyone puts politics aside, because we need to come together to be able to beat this. This is something that we've never seen anything like this before.
No, we haven't.
And if we don't, I remember in 2013, when we first started FIST, our second event in Brooklyn, I was speaking to an elected official who was going to be speaking at that event. And I said, I'm glad you're here. And I said, yeah, this is a real problem that we have here. And I said, it's incredible, because if this would have been, some form of virus, I said, they'd shut the bridges. They'd quarantine the area.
Absolutely.
And his response to me was, what are you trying to say? And I said, what I'm trying to say is that I feel like it's not getting the attention that it needs, right? Oh, so what are you saying? It's a conspiracy theory? And I said, I couldn't believe.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe how defensive he became. All I was trying to say was that I felt that if you look at the number of people that were being impacted by this, I felt that the response was not meeting. Now, this was a few years back. Since that time, there has been a lot of great things. And I know one of the things we wanted to talk about was the new heroin task force that Governor Cuomo put forward, which is an awesome step. But, since that time, and that was in October of 2013, to now, there have been a lot of steps that have been taken.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, we still haven't gotten the results that we want.
No.
And the results, that we're trying to negate is we want less people getting into the disease, right?
Absolutely.
And getting engaged in the process. And then the people that are in being able to get out, being able to get the help that they need. And you touched on the fact of treatment on demand. That's been one thing that's been a struggle.
And I know I've brought this to elected officials is, all right, we're going to keep emotions out of this. Let's talk business. So how much money is the state currently spending on Narcan? And that's an awesome thing. Everyone should have a Narcan kit to bring someone back
Naloxone now.
from death.
Absolutely.
Okay, how much are you spending?
Yeah.
So is that money well spent? Because most of those reversals lead to death at some point in time without treatment in the interim. So why are we wasting money? Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sorry, that's a life. Oh, you just said it. So then why do you have a problem holding that very same patient that was just dead on arrival to an emergency room and letting them walk out because now they're in withdrawal, they have to find something to use because they can't detox on their own.
Yeah, we just had this conversation.
So why, if you got to follow that step through.
Right. We just, yesterday at Communities of Solution, we were talking about this, I know I've had several experiences with family members who, have been outraged over the fact that, first of all, let me just say that I think having naloxone in everybody's hand is a step in the right direction. However,
Without a doubt.
It stops short in the sense that, all naloxone does is allows us, I shouldn't minimize it because being able to reverse an overdose is a big thing, but it's not sufficient. So I've had many calls of a family member that was saved through the use of naloxone, and just for the audience, naloxone, otherwise known as Narcan, we're getting away from using the brand name and using the generic name. So the naloxone will allow you to save somebody, and I've had many calls where a person got saved, went to the emergency room, was there for about 5 or 6 hours, was released, and was back there that night on another overdose. I have another family, a mother who called me up, outraged that her son, I think it was, I think it was the daughter, she had an overdose on a Saturday morning, got rushed, saved her. She was in the emergency room. They did what they needed to do. About 6 hours later, was let out. That evening, had another overdose, brought back. They did what they needed to do, went home. I think 3 days later, she overdosed, and there was nobody to Narcan her, and she's no longer with us today. And what that speaks to is what you're talking about, and there's this, we started off about talking about advocacy, about the idea, and this is what she said to me, like, I don't get it. Like, you always, there's this, when you're dealing with mental health, right?
Without a doubt.
If a person is a danger to themselves or a danger to somebody else, you can involuntarily hold them.
Absolutely.
So there's a movement to be able to hold somebody for 72 hours. One of the things that's odd, for a person who doesn't struggle with addiction, when you look at some of the behaviors associated with addiction, some of it just doesn't make sense, right? One of them being that you would think that if you were saved from overdosing, that you would get up and say, thank you, I forever owe you my life.
And that's the perfect way to put this into perspective. A person using a functioning, healthy mindset is going to say, wow, thank you. What do I need to do now to deal with my disease? Because if it was anything else, you would come out.
Right.
Discharge papers that say do not use heroin or opiates anymore is really not a discharge plan.
Not sufficient.
But if you can have them be comfortably detoxing and start to speak into a mind that is becoming clear, and engage the family members to come up with a plan for their loved one, then we've given them a running chance.
Right, and so the hope behind it, because when I was approached with this, I love the idea of being able to hold people, because there's some evidence-based practices like motivational interviewing where you can use this method to be able to approach the person and help them to look at things a little differently. In the moment, they're not open to hearing anything. So
well, naloxone brings a person into immediate withdrawal.
Right.
So their bodies hurt a lot.
Absolutely. So for you to be able to approach that person at that time, the chances of you being able to engage them are pretty tough. You actually have a better chance in engaging the family.
Absolutely.
Right? So I've been really pushing about, in those cases where we're saving somebody and we're bringing them to the emergency room, it would be awesome if we had a live human being in that emergency room who can pull the family aside and say, hey, look, here are some options where your loved one can get help. Not only your loved one, but you can get help and some support. Because I think a lot of times when that happens, the family is in crisis mode. when you find your loved one on the ground, or when that
Blue.
happens, yeah, you are in crisis mode. You don't know who to call, what to do, where to go. You don't know nothing. All you know is you're in an emergency room. Is he going to live? Is he going to live? Is he going to live? So I think that this idea of being able to hold somebody, I think, would be really beneficial. Now, there's some barriers, like how are we going to do this, who pays for the time that they're in there, and those are things that would have to be worked out. But if you can make an argument to me and say that we're holding this person because he's a danger to himself. So when you're coming to mental health and they put somebody in, and you can say this person's a danger to himself, so we need to keep them here. We need to keep them in a locked unit. How can't you do that, with somebody who has overdosed 2 times in the last 3 days? I don't, that seems a little bit strange.
It's not a choice.
Right.
They're not doing that as a choice. That's a need.
Mm.
That's a need for their body.
Yeah.
And I've said it out loud before. I was at the time that naloxone wasn't available.
Mm.
However, knowing what happened with my family and trying to access treatment for Thomas, and being told he's not high enough for treatment, he needs to fail at outpatient, that what would I have gained by reversing him if all those barriers were still there, except this poor young man would have suffered a lot.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm of the mindset that where there's breath, there's hope. And I hear
Absolutely.
what you're saying, if I save him and then I can't get him the help I'd like to use everything in my arsenal.
Absolutely.
To keep them
I
like.
no, and I
Right.
don't even
No, I know
mean
that.
to
Right.
minimize that, but watching a child live that life
In the grips of it.
in the grips of it
Yeah.
is heart-wrenching.
Yeah, sure. Not only for
Heart-wrenching.
them, for the family as
More,
well. Yeah.
they don't realize what they're doing, really. It's when they're struggling with withdrawing and all that pain and anguish and shame. My God, I'm letting my mom down again, because that's what the disease looks to do,
Right.
too.
One of the things that I think that hasn't been enough time spent on in terms of how do we change this, I think that if you take a look at the treatment associated with an alcoholic, or the treatment associated with a cocaine addict, I think that in my experience, and this is anecdotally, and there's some, in the past, when a person was addicted to heroin, way back, a person got like 18 months. I think one of the problems that we're having today is, so first it's about getting them in the higher levels of care.
Yes.
So, for instance, the higher levels of care, and detox isn't treatment, but detox is an essential part of the continuum. You can't work with somebody, right, while they are going through withdrawal, and you need to be able to help them. So that's that initial piece. But then after that, right, you have inpatient rehab, which, historically has been a 28-day model.
Correct.
Right? And then you have long-term residential. Long-term residential can be anywhere from, I wouldn't even consider 3-month long-term residential, usually looking at somewhere around 18 months, 12 months. The problem that we're having today is if you're a working person and you're out there and you got, Oxford, Aetna, whoever it is, one of the major insurance companies, they're not paying for that.
Right.
So if they're not paying for that, how do you get that care? So some people have said, well, take them off the insurance and get them on Medicaid. So now this is going back to the state.
And every New York State citizen is paying for that treatment,
Right.
while families are still paying premiums.
Right.
And United Healthcare then can post a $5 billion profit.
Right.
On the backs of who, I might add.
And
I'm not against anybody making a profit,
Right.
but at what cost?
Right.
Because I know for a fact insurance companies will say, years ago my dad worked for the phone company for 40 years, had the same health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
But in today's world, they're either not going to be on my policy in 6 months to a year, so keep withholding, so they won't be our problem. And if we keep withholding, we don't know what the outcome will be, so we won't have to pay the claim anyway.
Right. And then the other piece is,
I'm going to hold that thought,
Sure.
and we'll be right back after this message.
Welcome to Formula Auto Wash, where every day is a great day for a car wash. Open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. till 5:30 p.m. Sundays 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. Detailing packages for every budget, starting out at $29.99. 100% hand wash and detail centre. Hogshair and microfiber brushes and mitts. Proudly using Ecolab Blue Coral soaps and waxes. Formula Auto Wash has served the community for over 30 years. Senior discounts all day, every day. Ladies' Day Wednesday, $3 off any wash. Early bird discount Monday through Thursday till 9:30 a.m. Check out our website, formulaautowash.com.
You smell so good, I won't have to bathe the next 2 weeks. Anything. So, here, laugh a little harder. All right?
I will take him. I would be proud to show you off, you little old weirdo man.
Get a new sweater. The worst dressed man here tonight.
Right.
Look, get that laugh, and get it in there tonight because nobody else is going to laugh like her. She's under drugs, all right?
Could switching to Geico really save you 15% or more on car insurance? Do dogs chase cats?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Welcome back to Long Island in Crisis, and actually the purpose of the show tonight is to rile up everyone that's going to ever see the show, because we need an army to head to their elected officials, and keep in mind they are your elected officials, they're not leaders. They need to do what we want them to do, what we need them to do, not based on who contributes to their campaign fund or anything else. And if anybody ever needs to know, I'll show you exactly how to look up your elected officials' campaign contributions and where they're coming from. Just want to, you know. It's called, I'm a stirrer. But hopefully we're going to, you know what? When we talk about this disease, if I'm 40 years old and I'm continuing to make same decisions, okay, at least I'm an adult. Mm-hmm. But we are being robbed of John Venz's outreach program covers addiction from 12 years old to 18 years old. Mm-hmm. That's a problem. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are we as a society doing wrong? Because that's a problem for me.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that's, and when you think about these.
So how do you hold a 12-year-old accountable for a decision that they made? Because they're not capable of making.
Their brain's not fully developed.
Correct.
Yeah.
So when you look at your kids and you say, what were you thinking? They're not thinking. Because they haven't gotten to the point where they can make those kind of decisions.
You know, it's funny because I went back to school later on in life and started learning about, different life stages and all of this. And I find myself sometimes I'm in a supermarket and I see a parent yelling at a kid and they're speaking to them in the language of a 45-year-old mom or dad.
Right.
And they're speaking to a 6-year-old saying, what were you thinking? And I'm looking and I'm saying, like, you're speaking a completely different language. You're
correct.
And this, my daughter, and this I think just says it best. She had been sick for a little while, and she had a fever or something. She wasn't eating, and we really don't do a lot of junk food. But at this point, we were willing to do anything. We'll go get
whatever she wants, right?
Carvel's, whatever it is, and we were waiting on her hand over fist, and so. it was about 4 days into this, and she's sitting on the couch watching her shows, and I don't know, maybe she was like 5 years old, you know, or however old she was. And she says, "Mommy, can you change? Mommy, can you give me some potato chips? Mommy, can you?" So finally my wife had it, and she said, "Victoria, stop being so demanding." And Victoria is a little girl. She turns around, her lip is quivering, "But I don't even know what demanding means." And that speaks to what we're talking about, right? So my wife got frustrated and was expressing herself as a 40-year-old woman or whatever she was at the time, and you're speaking a language that they don't understand. But I want to go back to what we were talking about before the break about the idea of where we're spending the money.
Yes.
Right? So you had talked about naloxone, and what we were talking about at the break is, you know, what's the cost of untreated addiction, right? When you think about like the jails, when you think about psychiatric hospitalizations.
What has Sheriff DeMarco said? Is it $55,000 a year to house someone?
Yeah, I've heard somewhere about $50,000 or $55,000 for a person. And untreated addiction, I mean, if you look at the amount of people that are in jail who it's related to an addiction, so yeah, I'm not even saying just people that are selling drugs or people that are, you know, arrested for having drugs. I'm talking about the person that breaks into somebody's house because they got to get the next one, or the person that's under the influence and gets into a car accident.
And we're reading in the news or hearing that every single day. Banks being robbed at an alarming rate, correct, right? Cars being broken into, people just being mugged.
Right.
There's no coincidence here.
Yeah, I'm happy to, you know, like I thought this latest initiative with this tip line in Suffolk County has gotten a lot of hits, and there's been some movement in that regard because, you know, I've seen this, and I'm sure that this heroin task force that was created, you know, was looking at the people that are on it. There are a lot of great people on it. They have a lot of different perspectives. You know, you have prevention, you have treatment, you have policy people, you have families, you know, so they have a nice perspective on it, and I'm hoping that, you know, that they're going to end up putting some recommendations in place. And this is a task force that was created by the governor, so I think there'll be some backing behind it. But, you know, from my perspective, and I've said this before, I think that there's at least 5 things that I think of that we need to do better on. And the first one being access to the drug, right? You should not be able to go to your local handball court and be able to just get drugs.
They deliver to your house.
Yeah. Well, with phones today, it's somebody said to me something really interesting, and it's pretty telling, right? It's so easy to get heroin, but it's so hard to get treatment.
I remember that day.
I mean,
you know,
that's incredible.
And unfortunately, I had to go get a new phone, and while I was in the phone store, we were unfortunately somebody came in that was high on drugs at that moment in time, and the conversation started. And these young guys were telling me that their social media gets spammed by drug dealers.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. You know,
we live in a world where access to anything is immediate.
Yeah. So I think you know, this access to drugs, I think, is something that we have to do better on. In fact, you know, the heroin task force that was just created, they're doing listening forums, and the idea behind the listening forums is to get feedback from people from the communities and say, what are you seeing, what do you think? And there was a woman who reached out to me the other day. You know, through FIST, we get a lot of families that reach out to us, and one of the calls that I got was, I got a great idea. Who do I tell? You know, and what this woman's idea was that I think, because, you know, we've talked about, like, where is this heroin coming from? And there's a lot of talk about it coming from Brooklyn or coming from, you know, from the New York City, and then people, and I think at one point News, they had written an article, if I remember correctly, it was a front page about, no, but even like about the heroin highway, you know? So what this woman said is, why can't we put a penalty in place that if you cross over the border from the city into Nassau, it's a higher offense. If you go from Nassau into Suffolk, it's a higher offense. So, and I thought it was a good idea. I thought the idea is, you know, the struggle with the law piece of it, I'm a big believer in holding people accountable. The struggle that I have is being able to differentiate between the person who is an addict, who is doing what he has to do to get the next one, as opposed to the entrepreneur, the person who doesn't touch it and is just making money off of selling this
Yes.
to people. This person, I think there shouldn't be any leniency and this person, you know, you want to take, I think I would look at this a little differently. Not to say that they shouldn't be held accountable, but I think you
And
have
jail
to
may
take a look
save
at
their
it.
life.
Sometimes that's the case. So I think
You know,
access to
and
the drug,
having access to treatment in jail.
yeah.
That should be all part of, you know, why do we want to release a criminal with no rehabilitation in place?
Right. In Albany, they're doing something along those lines. They have a great, you know, couple of leaders up there, one of them being Sheriff Apple and the other one, Keith Stack. And they have a couple of things that they're doing up there. And one of them is treatment in the jail. And then when they get discharged, they actually take them to their appointment right at the place. They don't release them and give them an appointment and hope that they show up there.
Right.
They literally drive them to the place. And so there's like what we'd like to call a warm handoff, where the person has one less barrier, one less obstacle to be able to make it there. But they've already started the process, you know, in the jail and I know that, you know, in the past we've had a DART program, and
Yeah.
we've had certain wings of the jails. I think that anytime we can start the process in jail, I think that we get a head start. And plus we have them in a place where we'd like to know that they're not using drugs. So
Absolutely.
You know, you're able to get some information into them.
But we have to start prevention. Prevention needs more time and money, and prevention should be intertwined into every class, you know, that a child or a student takes. So here's my example, and I've shared this with other principals. They have summer reading, or you have reading during the year. Larry Glenn's,
Sure.
Forgiving Kevin. Why can't that be a book that you could read in an English class and start the dialogue? You know, in Northport, those Daryl St. George and Tammy Walsh do a great job. She's the math teacher.
the book,
She came up with the Project 72. What is that? Well, they renamed SAD, Students Against Destructive Decision, because kids say, well, what is that? That's the number of people that die in a 24-hour period. Engages them. Daryl will bring it into social studies. So it's always constantly being a topic, not just in health, not one and done. So what can parents do? You want speakers, you need evidence-based prevention. You don't need one and done. They're not scared. They are not scared by someone coming in and telling their story.
I think we should clarify for the audience what you mean by that. I know exactly what you mean by one and done.
So one and done, you know, having one assembly program where you have some speakers come in, maybe they're going to tell you their recovery story, but that's, you know, kids are not frightened by what they went through. They're not. This is coming from kids. They, however, kids in high school, so 9th, 10th, anywhere from 14 to 18 years old, when given certain questions, they would have loved to have been a kindergartner or a first grader and taught some relaxation techniques, some coping techniques, so that when they get nervous, they're not going to the nurse, that they know how to calm themselves and communicate, this is making me really nervous, I'm scared of, or I'm whatever it is. And if they had those tools in place, that pain that they sometimes feel of not fitting in, or that anxiety of being scared in school, may diminish.
Right. I think you're on a couple of things I'd say. So first of all, I'm in total agreement with the idea of prevention. Unfortunately, we're a society that is a reactive society. So we tend to spend money on things when they happen, as opposed to spending a lot less money preventing things from happening, right? Because, well, it won't happen. So whether it be about climate change, whether it be about, you know, shoring up our dams or whatever it is, right? When it happens, then we'll fix it. So unfortunately, so I'm in total agreement. I would love to see us put more emphasis on prevention. I think there's two things I would say. So as far as the one and done, I totally agree that that is not, I think it doesn't get you the biggest bang for your buck.
Correct.
I don't think there's anything wrong with having a speaker coming in, but if that's the limitation of your prevention program, I wouldn't even say that you're doing a prevention program. I'd say I'm doing a
That
forum
shouldn't
of
be the
events.
checkoff for a
No,
school district to
I
say,
agree.
okay, we handled that.
Right. But here's the
But
other
in
thing.
conjunction with,
Right, with a curriculum or something that's ongoing. And I like what you said about getting it in here and getting it in Daryl's and the social studies class. But here's a piece that we haven't touched on, which I really think is important. When you spoke before about the 12-year-old, or when I spoke about my daughter when she was 5 or 6-year-old, the part that's missing for the prevention there is the parents.
it's the family being on board with,
Well, we've talked about this
Yeah.
idea of the 3-year-old's birthday party.
absolutely.
We've talked about the idea of the kids being around the table, waiting for their piece of the cake with the little cone. I don't even know if they have those things anymore. The
That
cone
little
thing.
hats, yep.
And then if you were to pan back, how you see the adults around the room with the beer in their hand or something along those lines. And I think that, look, we're not the alcohol police, but I think that, and I'm the first one to say it, okay? I think that as adults sometimes we don't realize the messages that we're giving off to our loved ones, right, without even realizing it.
Yes.
So I remember my son one time following me. I took him to a football game of mine.
He's going to shave, right?
I'm watching him do things, and he was very young, and I didn't even realize
He
that
was mimicking you.
And so if he's doing that, right? How many times and what messages are we sending in our behaviors? Are we aware? Now we can rationalize in our head and say, well, listen, kids are to be seen and not heard, or whatever the case is. But the reality of it is if we're going to do a comprehensive prevention program, and I'm not a prevention specialist, and I'm not professing to be, but from the experience that I have heard at different places, my thought would be that besides just working directly with the kids, I think there's two pieces. One is the families, right, and working with the parents and helping them to understand what the kids are seeing and how they're interpreting what they're seeing.
Correct.
As well as
the community.
What's this? Yeah, what's this you going into a place? Look, years ago, I remember years ago, there was a big outrage that when you walked into like a stationery store or something,
yes,
there would be pornographic magazines, and they required them to take them off, and they had to put them in a place
and
right,
cover them in
something so
paper
that
bags
it was
or
right,
whatever.
something so it wasn't so
blatant.
Right. So that kind of stuff. If I know there was a conference. I know Kim was involved in this a few years ago, which really opened my mind about the idea of like these buses with these big alcohol ads on the side of the bus. So I think that we have to take a look at, in terms of the
society.
Community, like what's the message that we're sending out?
Every family, mom and dad is entitled to do what they would like to do. If you want to have a glass of wine or beer or some kind of anything when you get home, when do you have it? Mm-hmm. And why do you say you have it? Because little ones will watch you come in, and this goes really to John Venz's program. If I'm from the age from when I can be aware to the age of 10, I see mom and dad come home and say, I had such a bad day, pour me a glass of wine. I had such a bad day, I'm going to have a beer, don't talk to me right that. So now I'm 10 years old, I'm coming home from school, I had a bad day. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have a beer. Why do you think they're starting that? Because parents are still their children's greatest teachers. Mm-hmm. And that's a compliment to all parents. Right. So imagine just for a moment that you come home from work and say, I had a bad day. I'm not cooking dinner right now. I just want to sit on the couch and let's talk about our day. And I'm going to explain, because that's going to make me feel better. Or let's let's go for a walk for a minute. Let me clear my head and then we'll come home. Or let's go out and have pizza.
Right.
It's just sending a different message. We need to communicate about my feelings. Mm-hmm. They're not cured by having a beer or a glass of wine.
Right. No, that's a great point that you make. Recently we did a piece. It was a German TV station who approached us here in Long Island about wanting to do a story on Long Island about the opiate epidemic. And there was a couple of things they were interested in. One thing they were interested in is the legislation, not the legislation, but the lawsuit that's being brought forward from legislator Clarko and towards pharmaceutical companies saying that, you told doctors that it was safe to be able to dispense this.
Absolutely.
And doctors dispense this, and a lot of people now. So that was a part of the story. And then the other part of the story is they wanted to show people who never had a history of addiction, who were prescribed,
into addiction
and became addicted. So I sat down with the producers because we did a whole big thing. We did an interview, we did a mock group, and I said, so tell me, what's this all about? And they said, well, in Germany, they said that they only prescribe opiates. They're very controlled. He says, and they only prescribe them under two circumstances. One of them is end of life, and the other one is cancer, like late stage cancer. Those are the only reasons that they will prescribe opiates. So if you have a root canal, you're not getting opiates. If you have, whereas, so they were showing the contrast about what it's like over there, in addition to the very strict, controls over the prescribing of it. They don't allow them to do commercials on TV for it.
Oh, so if you're constipated from the use of
like
opiates?
That, right. So that's what they were trying to show is they were saying, all right, here's where we are now. Here's where the United States is now, because what was happening was the pharmaceutical companies were trying to change the laws there. They were trying to open up, at least this is what I was being told, they were trying to open up that they should be able to prescribe it for other things and that they should be able to put these advertisements on TV. And this goes
Good for Germany.
Now think about it, right? You think about like the problem that we're having here, right? And you think about like, so they don't have anywhere near the problem we have. Is there a correlation between the fact that they really limit the dispensing of it and that they don't allow the commercials to be on TV? Does that play a part in it?
Without a doubt.
And you'd have to believe that that's the case, that
Absolutely.
there's got to be. And the other day when some of our group did CNN, and
right.
Dr. Drew said, which I thought was great, he said, if you're a doctor and you are prescribing opiates to anyone for more than 2 weeks, you need to really consider the risks. And not only the doctor, but the person taking it.
Absolutely.
You really have to consider the risk associated, right, with taking opiates for 2 weeks or more, right, on a consistent basis. And I think that that's true. And I think that from my perspective, I think most human beings feel this way. I go to the doctor. He's the doctor. He knows what he's doing. I don't know about this.
Unfortunately, and we're going to get into that, but we'll be right back after this message.
Welcome to Formula Auto Wash, where every day is a great day for a car wash. Open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Sundays 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Detailing packages for every budget, starting out at $29.99. 100% hand wash and detail centre. Horsehair and microfiber brushes and mitts. Proudly using Ecolab Blue Coral soaps and waxes. Formula Auto Wash has served the community for over 30 years. Senior discounts all day, every day. Ladies' Day Wednesday, $3 off any wash. Early bird discount Monday through Thursday till 9:30 a.m. Check out our website, formulaautowash.com.
Galaxy Luxury Coach is a full-service limousine and party bus company. Family-owned and operated, we are an industry leader with over 25 years of experience in providing best-in-class luxury transportation for your special event. Whether it's your precious wedding day, an all-day wine tour out east, your high school prom, that special birthday, or just an amazing night on the town, our professional chauffeurs stand ready to ensure your special event is truly special. Galaxy Luxury Coach has one of the largest and modern party bus fleets in the New York area. Our party buses are simply nightclubs on wheels. Concert sound systems, light shows, lasers and strobes, multicolor LED lighting brilliantly lights your party bus inside and out. For corporate and more laid-back events, we will cater to your specific needs and requests. What sets Galaxy aside from all others in the luxury transportation industry is our attention to detail in customizing our services to your special event. At Galaxy, it's all about you and your guests. Galaxy customers return time and time again because they know they can trust Galaxy to help deliver those lifetime memorable moments. Step aboard and let your Galaxy experience begin.
You smell so good, I won't have to bathe the next 2 weeks. Anything. So, here, laugh a little harder. All right?
I will take him. I would be proud to show you off, you little old weirdo man.
Get a new sweater. The worst dressed man here tonight. Right? Look, get that laugh, and get it in there tonight because nobody else is going to laugh like her. She's under drugs, all right?
Welcome back to Long Island in Crisis. So a few things that I think we should really end with is prevention. If you feel that prevention needs to be in your community or in your school, show up. Get a group of like-minded parents, go to your Board of Ed meetings, and demand that an evidence-based program that is continuum over the 10 months that your child is in school be in place, and perhaps access for your child to have to speak to someone.
Yeah, you know, and
a professional.
To take that one step further, because I think that would be the course of action. I think that would be get together other people that feel as strongly about
Absolutely.
it. Approach your Board of Ed and say, hey, look, you know, we pay a ton of money in school tax, and we'd like to see this put into the budget. But I think that, I don't know if people realize that there is actually a credential given out by Oasis for people that do prevention.
Yes.
So there are a lot of people showing up at schools and stuff like that doing
that are the one and done. So
right, doing events. But
yeah.
But I think it would be probably it would be my thought would be if I was a local advocate in my community, I'd probably want to research a little bit about prevention. Maybe even picking up the phone and calling up Oasis and
Absolutely.
saying, hey, look, we're interested in getting some prevention programs.
And there's an
here.
Oasis office on Long Island.
Yeah, yeah.
And we have, you know, families in supportive treatment that an email could go to. You can reach me at Thomas's Hope at the Facebook page. Anybody that needs any information, you know where to find a lot of people. We can point you in the right direction to really help you get the right, there is a science to prevention. And protective factors and a lot of things that need to be built in.
And we have some great people right here.
Well, Kim Laube, so
Kim Laube's
from
a rock
FIST,
star,
from our
yeah.
FIST family, Kim Laube, who does prevention
from Hugs.
unbelievably,
Yeah.
and Dr. Jeff Reynolds, two people from FIST are on the
Pam Mizzi with
Pam
Prevention
Mizzi,
Resource
yes.
Center.
But
there are a
those
few
two are on the
places.
heroin
Yeah.
task force put forth by the governor.
Yep.
So we have very talented people on Long Island. We don't have to go out of state to get prevention as a one and done type of thing. What else can parents do? I know that you know my story. If I didn't have the education that I had, my son Andrew was prescribed opiates after telling the pain management doctor that my son Thomas died to the disease of addiction. No, if he takes them as prescribed, he'll be fine. 4 Percocet a day for 21 days would lead my son into being to the disease of addiction. Not that he had it, but that would force his body to that. So as a parent or as, you need to be your own advocate and know what your child is getting. And no one's doing you a favor for a root canal giving you 90 Percocets or Vicodins.
Right.
Don't take them.
Absolutely. I think, and that's what we were talking about at the break. I know I grew up whatever the doctor said, he's the doctor, you know.
Absolutely.
And I can tell you as a parent, it's been that way as well. When my kids were young, whatever the doctor said, he's the doctor. He had to go to school for this. You know, he knows a lot more than I know when it comes to that. Unfortunately, you know, I think that when it comes to this latest epidemic, I think that, you know, we're starting to see that, unfortunately, doctors were limited in the amount of education they were given when it came to the prescribing of opiates and opioids.
And the disease of addiction.
And the disease of addiction. So I think that that becomes a little bit of a concern. So I'm in total agreement. When you told me your story about when you took your son after he had that injury, and you let them know, listen, my other son died from this, so please stay away from the opiates, and if you're going to give him opiates, give him 2 or 3 or whatever to get him through this initial period, and we'll switch over to Aleve or whatever other, you know, over-the-counter thing you can do. That's concerning. It's concerning that, you know, you were a proactive mom and bringing it to his attention, you know, about the history in your family. And, you know, I think that becomes concerning. So I think the takeaway from that, for me, is as a parent, educate yourself. You know, this family education.
And we have young athletes competing at a very high level. They're playing baseball maybe 12 months out of the year, lacrosse, wrestling, whatever it is. They're doing things to the upteenth degree. Right. So, you know, John, you know, that whatever the elbow surgery is. And,
Tommy
you know,
John.
yeah, but we have kids that are really probably doing things that maybe they shouldn't be for their bodies at that point, but that's up to each parent. But if your child gets hurt, you better know how long your child should have those, because too many kids have been prescribed into addiction and then not by choice cross over to heroin because opiates are very expensive.
That's a great point that you bring up, because, you know, we've been talking about the heroin, and I've said this on numerous occasions, and I'll say it again. As a clinician, I've treated a lot of people that were addicted to heroin. 100% of the people that I treated that were addicted to heroin did not start with heroin. Not 99%, not 98%. 100% of the people that I've treated that were addicted to heroin did not start with heroin. The majority, cigarettes, marijuana, or alcohol. In the last 4 or 5 years, there has been a new cohort, which is people that didn't touch any of those things. Sports-related injury.
Yes.
An injury at work, right?
Given construction.
Painkillers. Yeah.
Right.
How many athletes do we know blew out a knee? We know of an athlete who broke his wrist and wanted to still be able to compete, right?
Absolutely.
Give me the medication. I want to be able to get back out there. My team needs me. I want to play. And so I think that's a shift that's happened. So I think the takeaway is, as parents, empower yourself, educate yourself, know about what it is that you're dealing with. When we do the family education series on Monday nights over at Seafield, it is amazing when we do either the disease of addiction or codependency and enabling. The parents sometimes say, oh my God. You know, their mind just completely opens up to looking at things from a little bit of a different perspective. I did that. I did that.
Yeah.
I did that. Now,
and
it
nobody's
wasn't done out of
pointing,
maliciousness.
right?
No,
nobody's pointing blame or anything else.
What do you say? You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know. You know. You make the best decisions you can in the moment in time that you were.
Absolutely.
That's all anyone's capable of doing, and that's why when we have these conversations, I hope that the takeaway from this isn't, I'm not accusing or criticizing or anything. I'm trying to empower parents to look at things differently and to bring forth to their family so that they don't have to live my holidays with an empty chair, my every morning and my every night when I go to sleep without my child in this world. Never mind in my house, in this world. And there's way too many people that are walking that walk out of no choice of their own.
And I think that was the impetus why you started this.
Absolutely.
Right? Because, you know, maybe I can't turn back the clock, but perhaps I can change things for others.
And I need to change it for the generations that will come to be. Imagine, You know, this epidemic has gotten a running start on everyone. But imagine if today we start to shift things, and 10 years from now, kids say, I'm not doing that. I choose to be drug and alcohol free because that's how I want to be. I want to achieve goals. I want to achieve whatever it is that I want to achieve. And I can wait till I'm 25 to have a drink.
Sometimes it looks
Imagine that.
it looks like it's a problem sometimes that's insurmountable. And then I look back at smoking cigarettes.
Exactly.
Who would have ever imagined that you would get on a plane,
Go to a restaurant.
library, on
Got to
and
be
on
300 feet from a building. We can do this.
It definitely can be done.
Without a doubt.
It's not something that will happen overnight. We need to be persistent. We need to have a plan, and we need to work in collaboration. We did the last FIST event we partnered with Senator Murphy up in Yorktown. The speaker that spoke on treatment was Patrice Wallace-Moore, who's one of the members on the task force that. And she said something which was great. You know, she said, listen, there is no us and them. They said, we need, and she actually had everybody, you know, so prevention, stand over here. Treatment, stand over here. Parents, stand over here. We locked arms in arms. And that's what it's going to take
Absolutely.
to be able to beat this. The schools, the doctors, the law
community.
enforcement, the legislators, everyone working towards a similar goal, so that no matter, you know, in treatment sometimes we'll use this term, there's no wrong door.
Right.
So whether you go in here or whether you go in there, if like somebody brought to my attention the other day, I was at a mental health conference, and the woman was saying how her son or her daughter, no, it was her daughter, had got sent to us at Seafield for treatment. And what she needed was beyond what we were able to offer them. But the clinical director there sat down with them and said, hold on, you know, what you need is beyond what we can offer you, but there's a place that I know of. And he helped make a referral, and he made a handoff. Do you know that the person is sober today for 2 years? And the mother came over to thank me for that. And I said, you know, you would like to think that this is the way it's supposed to work. And that's the concept of no wrong door. So if you go to a place, let's say it's a substance abuse agency, and they do an evaluation on you, and they determine that really the bigger part of your problem, or the primary, not the bigger, the primary problem is mental health, we really need to get you into an agency that focuses on mental health and can do chemical dependency. So you would like to think that no matter where they went, they would end up getting to the right place where they needed to go.
You know, when you do the right thing comes back to you. That's how I've lived my whole life. You don't need to worry about any one thing. Mm-hmm. Just always do the right thing, because you have your integrity in this world. That's it.
I think the biggest struggle that I see is in terms of the perspective of the family. I think there's two things. One is they're hurting during crisis, and in some cases they're disgusted, angry. He stole from me, she did this to me, whatever. But then it's the idea of, I don't even know who to call. I don't know what to do. And when I testified at the last Senate hearing, I said to them, you know, like, I'm a person that's been doing this for 15 years. And sometimes I have a hard time getting somebody connected with help the day that I get the call. Sometimes it takes a little while. And unfortunately, with this illness, a person that's willing to get help today might not be willing to get help tomorrow. So it's about seizing that opportunity. And I think that the families, I think this idea of family navigation, of families being able to at least call someone and say, listen, I don't know nothing about this. Who do I call?
Well, we have FIST,
yeah.
So you can always call FIST. Facebook page, Thomas's Hope FIST will get you to the right places that you can be. Disconnect to reconnect to your family is what I want to say to parents. Shut your phones off. Connect with your kids on a different level. Too much. Come back to just be, so that you know where they really are.
So great, doesn't it?
It does.
To
It
be
does.
able to put the phones aside,
Just
put the computer
just
aside.
for a half an hour.
Yeah.
For an hour. You know, imagine. Have them, you know, get to know them. Be in their space. Because you're their you are still their hero, even if they will never admit to that. Be your own best advocate in healthcare. If you have questions, ask them. You know, go to your schools, demand evidence-based treatment that is intertwined, and then I want you to contact FIST, the Facebook page, do whatever you want to do, because we want your name, we want you to get involved, and we need an army of people that's going to start this shift. I'm fired up, I'm going to remain fired up, and there is going to be change, because singularly we are...
Each finger individually is weak, but when we come
together, we have a lot of power, and we're finding that out.
Absolutely.
So
and that's a great point.
We can't negate that ever.
The person who is going through this sometimes feels alone.
Well, when you're going through this,
Yeah.
no one else, unless you've lived through this, knows the insanity of your life at that moment in time. So don't try to point out solutions. Try to remember who else you know had a child or them themselves lived the disease of addiction, and connect those two people. That's help. We're going to see you next week, and have a great week, and I really want you to think about getting involved to change society. We have to do it. Have a great week. We're still...